Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I'm excited to have conversations in this podcast for men. And I don't know that there would necessarily be a more on-point topic than our conversation that we have today with our very special guest, Toby Freeman. Now, here, first and foremost, the conversation is about testicular cancer, okay? Don't switch off. Don't switch off. I know it can be perhaps an uncomfortable topic, but at the same time, it's uncomfortable, I think, because the sensitivity that's there is such that many of us might not be necessarily comfortable talking about it. Well, hey, guess what? You can listen, you can watch. And really, at the end of the day, this is one that's worth watching. Toby is one of the principals, the tip of the spear of a very important organization called the Robin Cancer Trust. It's out of the UK, and you can find them online. You can go and look at them. But I really would love to hear Toby's story, because he talks about his brother. His brother passed away 14 years ago of testicular cancer, a very rare kind, actually. And we get into that. We get into the weeds a little bit of the different types of testicular cancer that's out there. By the way, 95% curable. If you know the signs. We talk about the signs. If you know what to look for, or feel for, and I'm not just saying cupping your balls either. I'm saying the feeling inside. We talk about that, and it's worth listening to, because much of the time the stories end up successful. They end up happy. And we talk about that. We talk about the podcast that he and his mom host, Thrive Against Cancer, or the Thrive Against Cancer podcast. They're the hosts of that. And it's a conversation. One of the things that Toby says near the end of the episode is, one in two people are going to have it at some point. That's the forecast. Many of us, if not most of us, have talked about the C word, and there's somebody in our life that it's happened to. And we go through a whole bunch of stuff. Now, there's a lot of humor in this podcast as well. The thing that I love about this amazing charity that they've created in Toby's brother's honor is that they've incorporated his DNA. He loved dark humor, and he was funny. Toby talks about what he's about to do, and what he's about to do is go run a marathon in a ball costume, which is crazy. And it's not the first time either. If you go, it won't take you long to go and find footage of him doing these sorts of things to create awareness, and also to put a smile on people's face. And we talk a lot in this episode about destigmatizing these things. So, podcast, heCast, the podcast for men, that's what this is. I hope you enjoy our very special episode with our guest, Toby Freeman. Toby, I'm stoked to have you here. I'm so curious, and everybody will get caught up to what it is I'm going to be talking about here, but I feel like you've been banging the same drum for a long time and telling the same story for a long time. Saying old things to new people. And at the end of the day, I'm curious if it's therapeutic for you. Have you gotten tired of it? Has the story changed, and the way that you tell the story changed as you've grown into this thing, and as the Robin Cancer Trust has expanded the way that it has? Are you sick of telling the story yet?
No, I think the first thing to say is, when I tell my story, I get to talk about my brother, which keeps him alive, keeps his story, his journey, his experiences that I take with me alive. And any opportunity I get to do that, I feel very privileged for. The old adage, you die twice, when they bury you in the grave, and then the last time someone says your name as well. So I love keeping my brother alive in that way. And the message hasn't changed. I love podcasts because it's a bit more of a open and honest conversation. Sometimes when you say the sound bites over and over again, you feel like, I think I've said that 100 times. But when you're talking, you find new ways of describing old experiences, and you take new insights for them and share them. And I really enjoy that. So not bored of it yet. And I think the message, what we do and why we do it, more important than ever, actually. It's just been compounding over 14 years now of telling our story, Rob's journey, and then the journey of the charity ever since.
I can't wait to get into all of that and introduce our audience to what it is that you're doing, because it's a bunch of words. Inspirational is one, heartfelt is the one that I keep going to. Is and what a beautiful sentiment. The idea that not only do you get to say your brother's name, but you get to tell the story, and you get to create awareness and help people not have the same fate at the same time for the same reason that your brother did. 14 years. I got to ask right here, and we'll tell the story. We'll unwrap as we go. But in that 14 years, I am certain that you have seen or heard success stories. And I mean, the gratification that must come from that. Do you have a few success stories that we could talk about here as a result of what it is that you're doing, the awareness that you're spreading? Somebody's life has radically changed, improved, been saved.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so privileged. I get to see that story every day almost. A dad in our hometown, he did a fundraiser for the charity. He became aware of us. He then, because of that fundraiser, was aware of our materials. He took those materials and he found a lump. And because of that, because of our great NHS, he found the lump, got cured. He had a really aggressive type of testicular cancer, but actually, because of the quick intervention, he then went on to have 2 kids. And our kids go to school very close to each other, and we cross paths nearly every other day. I see him and I wave to him, and I know him really well, and it's just this amazing reminder right on my doorstep, just of the power of what we do. Just something as simple as a card, just that could save someone's life, just sharing that information and someone taking that action and doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So that one hits home all the time because I get to live it.
Yeah, my gosh. I had no idea there'd be one that would be so on point. Somebody literally inspired by the story. Yeah. Let's do a fundraiser. Oh, hey, yeah, you know what? I better practice what I preach. I'm going to go check. Holy crap. It's a podcast for men that we have here. Cancer. Okay, the C word, all of us have been affected. I don't think one person around that hasn't had someone in their life affected by that C word. Now, when it comes to men, we're talking about going under the hood and testicular cancer. I mean, we're talking about, vulnerability of vulnerability. That in so many ways, this is one of those ones that I think people shy away from, that there is avoidance behavior when it comes to this. And I want to get into Robin and what happened there, his story, how you have taken it as a mantle and built this amazing organization, you and a team of people. It's not just you, but you're spearheading this thing, Toby, and what's happened. So let's get into it a little bit, because there are guys out there that are listening to this that might be silently not even knowing that there's an issue, and it is certainly worth looking into, despite the vulnerable nature of it.
Absolutely. So my brother, just to give a bit of an overview, fit, healthy, active, very, very health conscious. My older brother by 2 years. I'm the youngest of 3. So he was the guy I looked up to the most. Very good at sports, very funny, very witty, and had his life together. I didn't have my life together too much back then, but we played football together. He looked after me and sort of kept me on the straight and narrow as best he could. Yeah. But what he did have was a series of signs and symptoms. Now, my brother had a really rare form of testicular cancer. So he actually had a primary in his chest. It was a rogue testicular cell that never found its way down to his testicles when he was an embryo, and it sat dormant for 23 years. So although it was a tumor in his chest, it hadn't spread from his testicles. It was just a cell in his chest that started replicating. So he had abnormal signs and symptoms. He was actually the only guy I knew who checked himself regularly. He had gone to the doctors and found a cyst on his testicle because he was very health conscious. But he ignored signs and symptoms for months because he didn't know they were accumulating to something serious. He had chronic fatigue, he had a sudden change in bowel habits, and he was having night sweats. So waking up drenched in the middle of the night, not just, I've had a sweaty nightmare, full needing to change the sheets, drenched. And so none of that is normal, but he just thought, I'm young, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm active, but I'm just a bit stressed. I'm doing a career, I've got university, I've got my life, my relationships. So he ignored them and put them off. unfortunately, for far too long. By the time he went to the doctors, there was toing and froing because he was young. We see that with young cancer patients. Obviously, it's hard to get a diagnosis. By the time they found it, Rob had a grapefruit-sized tumor wrapped around his heart and his lungs. So it was stage 4. He's 24 years old. And that just sideswipes you. You know, no one was thinking cancer at that age. He was fit. He was healthy. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink. You're not thinking it. So what we went obviously through this grueling 10-month period of several rounds of horrible chemotherapy, clinical trials, stem cell transplants. You know, people listening to this will know the cancer journey well, the ups and downs, the highs, the lows, getting close to having the surgery, but then his blood's being off and not being able to do it. And we just watched him decline over that period. And unfortunately, from the January to the December, we watched him go from prime of his life to diagnosed with cancer through treatment to quite literally holding his hand on his deathbed at our local hospice. And the idea for the charity was born not whilst Rob was with us. We just sort of promised him that he'd never be a photo on the wall, that we'd talk about him, that we'd keep him alive, but we didn't know the charity was this thing we were going to do. And my dad, being a very, very pragmatic man, said, if we're going to do something, it's not going to be a grief reaction. It's going to be needed. No other charity is going to exist. If they do, we'll just support them. And we're going to create something that outlasts us. And they were like the 3 mantras that stuck with us. And we realized no one was doing this for young people, talking about testicular and ovarian cancers under the guise of germ cell cancers, which is what we do. And that was where the idea of the charity was born. And as I'm sure we'll get into, we started with fun events that young people wanted to attend. And we started with humour. And we just went, we know Rob loved music and he loved having a good time, and he had a dark, wicked sense of humour. And we were like, well, we're just going to use that to engage young people. And it's worked really, really well.
I love that. The focal point isn't necessarily, and I mean, of course, the focal point is on the medical issue and awareness of it, but the idea that this is something that's wrapped around his spirit. And you know, the fact that he is funny. Yeah, we are going to get into some of the things that the antics that have been done and that are coming up. We're going to get into that. The idea that you all can have a laugh and you can ignite some of that dark humor, and I'm certain that there would have been times where, would this make Rob laugh, or would Rob think this was funny, or Rob would think this was funny, like and those are moments where, again, you're not just keeping his name alive, you're keeping his spirit alive. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The idea of testicular cancer existing somewhere else other than your balls is a weird idea. I've not heard of that before, and I've talked to people who are advocates for this sort of stuff, prostate, testicular cancer. We had a gentleman who was on the show. He just recently, unfortunately, succumbed to it. He had literally penile cancer. These are these things that you don't. There's so much nuance to this, and the idea that testicular cancer can exist in the body somewhere else other than that region is extremely, I mean, there's a part of it that's fascinating. I mean, that's so interesting that a tumor like that could grow in the chest and yet still be related to that condition.
Yeah, it's incredibly rare. Just to say, testicular cancer as a general here in the UK is around 2,400 cases a year. I think in America it's like 10,000 cases a year. So we are talking very rare, mainly in 15 to 45-year-olds. My brother's case, you're talking an absolute handful, very, very rare, every single year. So again, didn't know the signs and symptoms to look out for, but there were big red warning signs that we didn't know about as a family. He wasn't talking to us about, he didn't know about, so that they were missed. And that's the crux of the matter, is symptoms were ignored. And the more we can talk to young people in a way that they want to be engaged, that's the key. And humour is a really good tool for that as an icebreaker. Then we can break down that barrier, break down the stigma, make it not scary, because cancer, you know, you said earlier, the C word, that's what it was to me when it was growing up. It wasn't cancer, it was the C word. Just break down that sort of generational trauma around this word that if we can have these peer-to-peer conversations, really will save lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the fact that you've broadened it. I've talked about it on the show here. My wife and I wrote a book a few years ago. The book we wrote about was the experience that we went through when our then 18-month-old granddaughter She had a tumor the size of my fist behind her tailbone. She was 18 months old, and you know, she's with us now. She just turned 8, phenomenal, cancer free. But boy, the journey of going through that, I just want to talk a little bit about the mentality of when you go through something tough. You know, thankfully we were able to save ours. Many of the people at BC Children's Hospital were not as lucky. And I mean, you know, we trauma bonded with many of these families who were there at the same time as us. The reason my wife and I wrote a book about it is because we wanted to take a horrible experience and turn it into something good, at least, and try and pull as many positives out as we possibly can. I'm certain that over this time, you have had many people who poured themselves out just the way that I did with you, and they relate their own experiences, stories, that kind of a thing. But also the need to, when you go through something like this, you want to try and make the world a better place as much as you can, whether it's in the spirit of like it is with you, with Rob, or just even to create awareness out there. Is that one of the things that drives you?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that has grown over the years as well. I think the initial reaction, something good has to come out of this, is a very, very common reaction, right? We've gone through something awful. We want to feel that that was worthwhile, that that was something that we can put out to the world and prevent. And I think there is something beautiful in those connections. As you said, trauma bonding is a real thing, right? You can connect on a much deeper, much more, you know, intimate level with people over something that you've all gone through. And cancer is a connector in that way. Unfortunately, obviously, we all wish it wasn't. But yeah, I absolutely think that is a driver. I think it's an innate driver, and you once you start opening up past your own, there was this beautiful moment where I realized the charity wasn't about just Rob's story anymore. It was about all the other people. And there's something really amazing about amplifying other people's stories, which I'm very privileged to do through our own podcast, Thrive Against Cancer. Sitting there, as you know, it's difficult. You've been through something yourself, so you really empathize. I always say experience breeds empathy. And when, as you have, you know, we're talking about things that might be triggering in a way. You want to give yourself that vulnerability. You want to show that to your guests. You want to show that to your audience, because that is what connects us as humans. But actually, you want to protect that little bit of yourself where you go, this can't go too deep. I need to sit and, you know, you, as I have, I'm sure you've heard some very, very difficult conversations, some difficult stories. I've had guests where they've been in end of life care and I've been interviewing them. It's a heavy thing, but you take it as a point of privilege that you get to sit and you get to share that experience with someone, be in that space and tell their story. And I think that's what we want from the world. That's part of our legacy, isn't it? Either sharing other people's stories or sharing our own. And if you can provide a platform for that, I think that's a beautiful thing to do.
It's a beautiful thing. I wanted to get into that. When did you start the Thrive Against Cancer podcast?
Oh God, I'm terrible with my years. I think it was last year.
Okay.
It might have been 2 years ago now. I think we've been going a while. I know I launched it with my mum. So unfortunately, my mum is going through her own cancer journey, living with stage 3 ovarian cancer as well. So we had this idea for the podcast and we wanted to make it happen. Then we got funding for it through Macmillan, one of the major charities here in the UK. And they funded us. And then my mum was diagnosed. So actually it was 2024, sorry, is when we launched the podcast. My mum was diagnosed in the February. We launched in the May time, and I just sat down and I had a conversation with her about it. Very candid. You know, we talked about Rob, we talked about her, and we talked about the future. And yeah, I just thought it was an amazing way to sort of this horrible but beautiful full circle moment where we had this opportunity to talk about what we were going through as a family, again, from a different perspective. You know, she's a mother that lost her son, you know, and everything that comes with that, and then had just been recently faced with her own sort of diagnosis and what may come from that as well. So, and then it's grown, and we've had other guests of all prognosis, diagnosis, and genders, and clinicians and patients and family members. And it's just, again, feel really privileged to sit and amplify those stories out to the world.
It's an important thing that you're doing, because I think, it's one of the things in my part of my wife and I wrote the book, and half of it's literally hers, and you flip it over and half of it's mine. It's the things that we learned along the way. One of the things I learned along the way is that there are a lot of people who will practice avoidance behavior. You talk about avoidance behavior of men not wanting to get their balls checked. Man, there's when you're going through life and you get through, 30, 40, whatever years, and it's normal, quote unquote, whatever normal looks like, I suppose. And then suddenly this happens. Suddenly there's a radical health crisis or some sort of crisis that is going on. It is very interesting to see the way that the people around those people change and develop. It's like when there's an anthill and then you put a rock down in the anthill and you see the ants all scatter and they all go pick different routes than they were picking before. And when you're in that place, and I don't know if this is the same for you when Rob was going through what he was going through. But when you're in that place, it's fascinating because you haven't really changed. There's something that's going on in your life, but at the same time, you still like the same things that you and your friends might have been talking about the other day. You're still into that, but people are treating me differently. And yet at the same time, to have an avenue where you can talk about that stuff and you can get that stuff out there. When Alara, when our oncologist said to us that the tumor, was cancerous and malignant, and we're about to go through chemo and all that. This is after the surgery. She sat us down and she said, "Hey, just so you know, you're part of a club now. You didn't intend on becoming part of this club, but you're now part of it." And I didn't really know exactly what that meant. I was more thinking statistically, but it's actually not. There's a culture to it as well. And your podcast is giving people the ability that perhaps they've been stigmatized as they're being traumatized, and it gives them the ability to talk about that. Does that come up a lot?
All the time. Cancer ghosting, from friends.
Cancer
family.
ghosting. I've never.
Yeah.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah. I would call it a phenomenon, but it's not. It's a real thing that happens all the time. And the argument is, I didn't know what to say. And then the counter argument is, say anything. Saying anything is better than not saying anything at all. People literally avoiding people in the streets. We've had guests on saying, once my hair had gone, I would see them coming and they would cross the street just to avoid an awkward conversation. And again, it just adds to all of that stigma. That person is in the most dark, difficult place. Saying anything is better than saying nothing at all. And everyone talks about, those people that show up. And it's not always big. Everyone thinks it has to be these big Hollywood moments. And I always ask the guests, we have 5 questions at the end. One of them is, what's the most impactful thing someone did for you, during your cancer treatment? People are just cook food. Just came round, said nothing, and brought me lasagna, and then left the house. Or they came round, or while I was at chemo, they came around and cleaned my house, or they walked my dog. It doesn't need to be grandiose gestures and flowers in the post or anything like that. It's just hey, I'm here, I'm doing something. Or the other one is just, as you've sort of alluded to already, just treating me normal, for the cancer patient, because everyone treats them, wraps them in bubble wrap. Everything you're going through is abnormal. Your life becomes blood tests, your life becomes scans, your life becomes being poked and prodded and treated like this thing that needs to be fixed. And then it's sitting down and just, I remember some of my fondest memories with my brother were just watching Family Guy and American Dad, because that was normal to us. We sat there in the hospice in the last 9 days of his life watching American Dad, eating pizza. That felt normal. That's one of my fondest memories, because it was just like, oh, that's us. That's what we did. We played board games and we watched American Dad. So it's not people overcomplicate it so much. And I love what you said about the club, because actually we give out free cancer support packs to anyone affected by testicular or ovarian cancer anywhere in the UK. And it's called the Thrive Against Cancer is what it's all about, the Thriver packs. And on the front, it says, welcome to our club. Sorry, what does it say? Welcome to the club no one wanted to join, but we're glad you found us. And we're just like, look, we're here. That's what we're here for. This is rubbish. No one wants this. We don't want you to be part of the cancer club, but that's what we're here for. We're here to support you through that. And then we connect people with other people that have been affected. Because again, that moment when you don't know what's going on and you're apprehensive, talking to peers that have been through it. So we have a testicular cancer WhatsApp group ovarian cancer WhatsApp group and family and friends, because that's so important. Because what we hear as well, Mike, is the cancer patient being worried about the family and friends all the time. They're not worried about themselves. They're like, I feel looked after by my medical team. I'm worried about everyone else. So we knew this space was really important for people to go in and actually just be honest. It's very confidential. It's all vetted. But people can go and ask honest questions, because it's very tough being a caregiver as well. Let's not forget how difficult it is surrounding the person with cancer. It's caregiver burnout.
You bring up a really, really, really good point there. So my first question is, did Rob feel that way? When Rob was around, did he feel like did he feel like, I hate to use the word burden, but did he feel that way to you all as you were helping him go through this very, very, very crucial, the part of his life in many ways that would end up defining him. Did he feel that way?
Yeah, I think he knew the strain it was put. Our family got completely split because Rob was up in London. Mum and Dad went and stayed at the hospital for effectively those 10 months, apart from when he was in and out of treatment. Me and my brother were at home. My dad was still working. So, the whole family unit's completely stretched. I mean, towards the end, he sat us all down and wrote us a letter, saying you need to look after each other. He understood the impact of not just what we'd gone through, but what we were about to go through as a family unit as well. So he made it clear that he was like, you all need to be there for each other, because, I'm not going to be around, and you need to look after each other, because this bit is going to be really, really hard. And it was, but just him acknowledging it really helps, because you've got that anchor. You're like, all right, Rob said, we've got to get through this together. So let's get through this now. But yeah, I think people can see what's going on when you're going through it. Through the treatment, you're watching everyone panicked around you, and that's really difficult.
Yeah. And the other part of it is there are people who are listening to this right now. There are people who are listening to this that might get so uncomfortable they want to even shut it off, because they can't even imagine going through something like this. But I'll say this, when it comes to resilience in the human spirit, I mean, most people, if they were to look at their life and look back at their life, there's a couple of times throughout their life, they look at it and go, I can't believe I got through that. And I don't know how I got through that, because they're so far removed from it now. It creates the same awkwardness that they might be feeling the need to shut this thing off right now. It creates that same overwhelm, like how, and they're looking backwards going, I don't know how I got through that. And really at the end of the day, there's all sorts of ways that, I help try and suggest things to people, just share perspective when it comes to resilience and all of that stuff. You really, at the end of the day, the chapter in the book that I talked about, the subject is called Staying in the Fire. And you have not only stayed in the fire, you've kind of made it like it's a third of your life now at this point, Toby, staying in the fire with others and I'm certain using it to cope, using it to keep Rob alive, that sort of a thing. But when it comes to the resilience of taking things day to day, a lot of people don't realize how strong they actually are until they're actually going through it. And I appreciate Rob, giving you that letter. And yes, it was going to get really, really hard. But I think most humans, most families are a lot tougher than they think. And I'm curious what you and Mom, talk to people about when it comes to resilience, and when I'm certain it's something that comes up often as well.
Yeah, I suppose it's not a word you use about yourself very often, is it? Very, very kind to hear it, but it's certainly not. It's not something I would identify with. If someone said, "Say some words about yourself," I wouldn't say resilient. I would say I'm incredibly privileged to have an amazing support network, and I do recognise that a lot. When Rob was ill, for example, when we were told he was terminal, my dad owned his own business, so he said, I'm not working until this bit's done, and I'll come back when I want. My mum didn't work, and then my dad and mum prepped up me and my brother and said, you can quit your jobs, we will look after you. So there's an amazing amount of privilege that comes with that, right? We got to spend the last 8 weeks of Rob's life being a family and trying to make memories, knowing that we didn't have much time with him. And then after that, my family said, go back to work when you're ready. But if you want to start this charity thing, again, we'll support you. But, you need to get back to work at some point. So I found a job and I was like part-time with that, trying to build the charity. So I had a lot of support with that. And then throughout the years, I've got my amazing wife. She at one point, when I wasn't coping very well, gave me an ultimatum and said, go and see someone professional or this isn't going to work. And I went and got grief counseling. So again, I always advocate for when you're in that. The problem with grief is everyone around you is in the same whirlwind, right? It's affected everyone. Right. When you lose someone, it affects everyone. We lost my brother. I'm talking to my mum, my dad, my brother, my friends. All of them have known Rob their entire lives and love him dearly and are going through their own grief. Holding that space with a professional in a space where it was just my grief that I could express without anyone else's bouncing back at me was the most transformative thing I've ever done. I did 6 weeks of grief counseling and I went from crying for an hour to just just talking and chatting for an hour in the 6 weeks transformation. And at the end of it, the guy just said, we're here if you need us, if you want more counseling, but I think you're all right. Just come back if you ever need us. And it was like a safety net for me. So again, we talk about permission, peer-to-peer support. That was me just talking to a man in a room who I didn't know. And it was amazing. So I've been very lucky. Resilience it's habitual, isn't it? It builds the calluses. I understand that, but I have had a lot of help with that. So I think it would be remiss not to check myself on my own, my own privilege in those experiences. And, I've continued to have amazing friends. I do have a very open network of friends that we talked about it. They knew Rob. I remember we'd be drinking and I'd start crying and they'd be sad. And, that was okay. I had that permission that I know a lot of people don't have. And I had friends that supported me throughout that year and beyond. So I've always been very lucky in that way. So perhaps my resilience is propped up on the support of other people. And I feel at this point I am resilient enough to be able to amplify other people's voices. And I see it as a real point of privilege to be supporting my mum through her own journey in a very, practical way. I'm not responding in the same way I was when my brother was ill, where I had a lot of avoidance, negative avoidance. And now this time I'm sort of trying to build some, practical support for my mum. So you grow through your own failures. I think that's part of it.
Absolutely. You talking about permission there for a second, and I appreciate the fact that you talk about resilience and you got humility there. And so if you don't want to say it, I'll say it. No, you've got it there. And people who are listening to this is no, Toby, you've got massive resilience. Yes, you had a support system that helped you with it and whatnot. But again, to go back to how the way that you responded to that, and then something else you said, which I think is fascinating. Many times we don't give ourselves, we talk about this on the show all the time. We think about our best friend that we would do anything for. And when they're going through something hard, really hard, even if it was their fault, many times we'll stick with them and we'll give them love, support, care, all that stuff. And yet we are not willing to give ourselves that same love, that same care, that same support, that same respect. It's funny how that happens, and so sometimes it does take another person and saying, well, okay, I'm looking at you going, no, you're resilient. And you are, but you're not giving yourself the permission to even call yourself that because of all the other things you've seen, experienced, all that. Then you go to a place where your friends in the pub gave you permission to feel sad and to cry and whatnot, and you're in a safe space. That's a great thing too. How many guys out there right now don't give themselves the permission to get vulnerable and to cry and to release stuff? And I mean, 6 weeks, your life changed. You went from a place of your marriage, potentially being on the brink, and 6 weeks later had a completely different mindset. It's a testament to how everything is temporary, how we can improve, it can heal, but it comes down to a decision, and it takes strength to make that decision, to ask for help. But many times that is the hardest part of the whole thing. That's the rock bottom moment, is the point where you finally ask for the help, and then everything starts getting easier much more quickly. 6 weeks wasn't that much time.
No, not at all. And, perhaps that speaks to, I don't know, the male experience. I think we are bad at asking for help. And I think that's maybe because it's just not reinforced from quite early days. We shut down a lot. And, I'm not necessarily talking about myself here. I'm talking about in generalistic terms. We see this in what we do, stigma breaking, all of this with the charity. From a very early age, the peer-to-peer is removed from us, and it becomes, we talk about this toxic masculinity, right? It becomes about banter in a bad way, about, whose voice is breaking, whose balls have dropped, body odor, yada, yada, whatever it might be, who's got muscles, who hasn't, who's got chest hair. It's isolation across the board that reinforces all of these things that do seep in, over years and years. And that can be affecting people, avoiding the doctor in their late 60s, 70s still. People, you never know when you're going to get affected by things. But yeah, perhaps it's just a broader issue that we all need to try and break down.
I agree. I want to get to. I appreciate your candor, and it's very clear that you do this a lot, and that vulnerability is something that you have embraced as. I don't think that there's any other choice, going down the path that you've gone down to just really embrace this. Before we started, I said, "Is there anything you want me to avoid?" And you're like, "No, you're an open book," and it's very clear about that. Let's try and open the book of some of the guys that are out there right now. We've talked about this. We've danced around at the idea of avoidance behavior. Your brother, we have symptoms, and we're not trying to teach anybody to be a hypochondriac here, but at the end of the day, I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. I mean, there's a symptom that's like, oh yeah, it'll go away. It's just something I'm dealing with or whatever, but it'll go away. And many times it does, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it never did. And it starts coming out in different ways. Testicular cancer is one of those things where, again, I think that we don't know what we don't know. What are some of the things that we don't know?
So, I could do signs and symptoms. I've got a pair of testicles right here, actually, because, as I do. Thank you.
Of course you do.
So these are my granddad pair. They hang a bit loose. So obviously, they're a temperature gauge. When it's cold, they're all up here. So warm bath or shower is
warm
what
day.
we go for. Yeah, warm day. So we're just having a feel, fingers and thumbs. Some of the things that people don't know is it's not always a lump. So a lump is a really common symptom, but a lump can also just be like a water cyst. They're uncomfortable, but you need to get it checked out. So lumps can come up about the size of a pea in a month. So you're checking one testicle and the other. Cancer doesn't work symmetrically. What you will notice, so if you've got something in one, not the other, definitely needs to get checked out. As you'll notice from these pair, it's quite common for one to hang a bit lower than the other. That's very normal. So we're just checking the epididymis in there. You've got a testicle in your scrotum. This is your sac. You've got a testicle in there, and you've got an epididymis. And your epididymis is your sperm cord. So that wraps around the testicle. That can be quite tender. That's got a lot of nerves in it, but you want to just have a gentle feel around that. Anything that is massively swollen, obviously something the size of an orange or a grapefruit, definitely needs to be checked out. One that a lot of people talk about, but it's hard to describe, is a dragging sensation. Like when you're standing around, when you're moving, people just say, it feels like my balls are dragging. They're heavy. Obviously, you don't notice your testicles day to day. They're just in your boxers or your pants or free in there in your trousers. But if you're noticing them and you're like, well, I can feel my testicles, that is something that you might want to go, well, you definitely need to go and get checked out. Any pain obviously needs to get checked out immediately. And any hardness as well. The testicles, you never want to squeeze them, we know that, but they shouldn't feel rock solid like a pebble. So you're just checking once a month, because it's like when you're putting on a bit of weight, you may not notice if you look in the mirror every single day, but once a month gives you a good time period just to go, that wasn't there last week. Put a little thing in your diary. First Tuesday of every month, for example, is a great one. And just check. Anything abnormal, just go straight to the doctors. It's one of those weird ones that people avoid going to the doctors because they're embarrassed. But the mental load of carrying something, knowing that something's wrong in your reproductive area, is also completely crippling. So go to the doctors and save yourself loads of mental anguish. The quicker you find anything, the quicker it can be cured. It can be treated. It's most likely not going to be anything cancerous. If it is, earlier caught, the absolute better. And there's not too much to it. Once a month, 2 minutes in a warm bath or shower.
Yep,
that's all we need to do. We literally have the power in our hands. When people talk about other symptoms as well, fatigue is a big one. Sudden change of bowel habits or any pain, constant pain, sort of radiating up into the lower back. they can be signs of, cancer that might have started to spread as well. So that obviously needs to be checked out as soon as possible, especially if you have anything else going in the testicles.
The idea of, it's anything in life, right? Many times I think we can all relate to this. When we're faced with a decision, usually it's if there's a choice there, usually it's the hard choice is the right choice. But also the idea that, we many times will allow things to fester and grow and grow and grow, and we won't really make a move to change anything until it gets into the red, till it's like an emergency, that sort of a thing. That's a it's habitual across the board with many humans, that's just something that we do. We just wait. The idea of catching things early. Let's talk about the advancements that have been made, or probably even since this charity has started, since the trust started. The idea that we've made advancements in this sort of thing. How crucial is catching things early, and how much of a difference can it make?
Oh, in testicular cancer terms, we're talking 95% curable if caught at stage 1. So stage 1 is just, it's in your testicle, it hasn't spread anywhere. It's one of the most curable cancers. You're talking about, yes, you might you'll have to have an orchidectomy. That is where they take one of the testicles out.
Yep.
But that you could get away with no chemotherapy. They might just take that out and just survey you for a while and go, okay, you had cancer in the testicle. It's done now. It shouldn't affect your fertility. You should go on to live an absolutely perfectly healthy life that your doctor will just monitor. The later we catch these things, the worse the prognosis gets. My brother left his cancer for upwards of about 6 months of symptoms by the time they found it. Stage 4. That's the last stage, and that's how long these cancers can spread very quickly. Some of these cancers, they can be slow growing. Some of them can be very aggressive as well. So the earlier we check them, the better. But we are very lucky. There is a brilliant regimen of treatment. You have the surgery. There's amazingly effective chemotherapies as well out there. It's been the same regimen for absolutely years because it works so well. But yeah, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. I know guys that have lived the one ball life for perfectly healthily for decades now. And it's just one of those things.
Okay, so before I get to the antics, I want to I love the humor that you've injected into this, and I wanted to save it to the end of our conversation. So before we get there, I do want to probe a little bit deeper into the idea of what you've learned in those last 14 years, because I mean, again, it's a third of your life. It's really in many ways, defined who you've become. And what a beautiful thing to be defined by, a family connection and a family honoring. It's a beautiful thing. I'm certain when you were 22 you were in the throes of this, that wouldn't even been a consideration. I want to ask about, and clearly, doing the podcast with your mom, the vulnerability that you two are able to have with each other, the connection that you have with each other. Again, these are things that are pretty obvious, but I want to know about the unobvious things. What are some of the things that you have learned over the years, other than the technical medical jargon, biological jargon that you've learned and things like that? What are some of the things that you've learned over the last 14 years in going through this, other than, having a crusade?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wasn't prepared for that. I'll try and give my best answer. I think we've touched on many of them. The power of vulnerability is amazing. I once went to a conference, 600 young adult cancer survivors. This was actually in America. Obviously, I don't go to America very often, being a UK charity. And one of the keynote speakers stood on stage and gave this rambling, I've done this since my cancer, I've done this, marathons, ultra marathons, Ironmans, the whole thing, been on TV, and then just stopped and just went, you know what, I don't think this is very helpful. And he just sort of laid down the whole presentation and just gave this incredible, vulnerable moment of just I hated all of it. I kept pushing myself. I kept trying to prove to myself. I kept pushing more and more. And my mental health was getting worse and worse. And actually, I've been here this weekend. I've just realized that it's okay to say it was awful. And it was just this moment of beautiful vulnerability. And that's always stayed really close to me. Just the power of watching someone do that on stage in the moment, just because they had permission. So vulnerability is one of them. Permission is the other, which is, just the more you're around people, as you said, trauma bonding, people that have been in the community that have been through something similar, the more you realize the power of permission to talk about it, to normalize all of these things, the highs, the lows, celebrate the wins, but also commiserate the losses with people, and this permission that men are missing. And we do 2 campaigns: male orientated, female orientated, testicular and ovarian. They're so different. The ovarian, the peer-to-peer conversations are happening. They know about their health. They advocate for their health, but they get stuck at the doctors. And it's all about empowering people to go back for second choices, to know their body best, to be empowered to be the best health advocates. For men, it's just creating spaces where they feel they have permission to ask questions, to talk about something like this, to talk about something not like this, but adjacent. And I love what we do because we are so far on the stigma. We talked about prostate earlier as well. Prostate and testicular and penile cancers are so far on the stigma breaking scale. I feel this real privilege of what we do, that it cascades down from, mental health gets caught up in that, other health conditions get caught up in that, to, tennis elbow being down here where we were okay to talk about it. It's all those, it's all those things, right? The work we do breaks down a lot of stigma across a lot of health issues. And we find this, people come up and talk about their health journeys, whether it's cancer or whether they've had a different health thing or something that embarrassing might have happened to them, but they feel okay to talk about it. And this personal privilege of when you're around your mates and they come to you and they're like, I've just had this issue, and it's not about cancer, but it's something quite embarrassing, but they know you're the guy that talks about embarrassing stuff, so that they are okay asking you about this. And I love that. And we find that with our advocates, our supporters. They're like, my friends talk to me about everything. Like, yeah, because you talk about things, you create, for want of a better term, a safe space of permission where people can talk about their mental health, that they're struggling, that their marriage might be difficult, their kids, they're struggling with parenthood, whatever it might be. It's how we start to take some ownership and change society from a very granular level up. And I've always been a big believer in building things from the bottom up. So vulnerability, permission, and then just the power of the cancer community is unreal. The last question I always ask the podcast is what's the biggest lesson you've learned from being affected by cancer? And overwhelmingly, it is in some terminology or another, it's just about this gratitude for life. And I feel, I would never wish what my family have been through on anyone, but what it has done has allowed us a perspective on life that some people never get. And again, that comes through the adversity, the trauma that you go through. You see the worst side of life, but it makes all the brighter things shine so much brighter. You recognize all the moments. You take in all the little things. You don't take any day for granted. And I think that perspective is completely, not unique to cancer. It's unique to any sort of life limiting or trauma experience that people have gone through. But again, there's a privilege of having that in your life because it just makes every day absolutely exceptional, and I feel very grateful for that.
I really, really appreciate that heartfelt answer and the journey that you've been on, and how you've been taking that journey and using it to be a light in this world. It's a beautiful, beautiful, inspirational thing. It's also hilarious. You're about to go on a big run dressed as a ball, and to me that just is delightful. I'm a huge a lot of people. I'm a huge David Letterman fan, and I'm a fan of the antics that he and his staff used to do on the poor people of New York. They would go and they would do all sorts of different things, and he would send people dressed as certain things in certain ways. This to me is a little bit of that spirit. Now I want to talk about what it is that you're doing, but I also want to talk about some of perhaps the other antics. We talk about the dark humor that Robin had, and the idea that has been injected into the trust is like, that makes me really, really happy. What are some of the funny things that you've done over the years, and what are you about to do here?
Yeah, so we've done so many silly things. Usually surrounding testicles, as you do.
Sure.
Anything.
Balls are funny. By the way, balls are funny. They just are. Balls 100%. Are funny. So yeah. So let's make hay.
I love going from this really deep philosophical sort of conversation, deepest insights of life to testicles. Right, let's get in.
Yep.
Balls.
Me too. Me too. Yep.
So the campaign is called Talking Bollocks, which obviously is a very British phrase anyway. And it just means, can I swear? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
Yeah, sure, swear.
Oh, yeah, it's just like talking shit. So if someone's talking bollocks, they're talking shit. So it's a very British thing, and it's right on the edge. A lot of the media really don't like it, but then, certain media absolutely love it. So it works really well for us. We've always worked in that grey area. And we've done so many silly things. We sent a pair of balls into space. That was brilliant. We did a space balls campaign. So I've got a picture just of a pair of testicles just hanging above the beautiful blue sphere of Earth. That was great. We've marched around London as giant testicles with our big balls on our head, and I had these swinging in between my pants. We do a pants to cancer walk where we get everyone in there, because we do both. We do bloomers and pants, and we go in for this big 14-mile march around our hometowns. That's really good. And then there's so many, but the thing I do now, aside from being a serious charity CEO and podcast host talking about these really important things, is I've run 500 kilometers so far dressed as a giant ball bag, basically, and I have this 7 foot high, 3 foot wide, big hairy pair of balls that I've run London Marathon, Brighton Marathon several times now, and then I've done loads of little races, but I ran across the country in them over 3 days. I did a coast to coast ultra marathon, supported by my parents, which was lovely. They got to experience that with me. One of our now trustees ran 100 kilometers with me, and then later in the year I'm doing a 1-day 100-kilometer run with 2,000 meters of elevation, just as a giant pair of balls, just because why not? If you can, you should, and that is my rule for life. So I'm
if you
okay
can,
at running.
You should.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm genuine. I'm really lucky. Like, I'm in good health. Working in the space we work, I feel I take my health really seriously, and I'm able to run these marathons and these ultra marathons. And then I basically said to my wife, I was like, look, I love running and I love talking about testicles. Can I merge these two? And she just did that thing where she withered her eyes and went, oh, yes, as long as I get lots of spa days and holidays this year. I was like, right, let's go. So it's just become a 2-year thing now where I just keep escalating it to more silly things. So the dream is to run alongside like David Goggins or is it Andy Glaze, the other ultramarathon runner?
Yep.
I'd love to do some ridiculous challenge just running alongside them one day. David Goggins shouting David Goggins things whilst I'm dressed as a pair of testicles jogging along.
Who's going to move the boats? Who's going to move the boats?
Who's going to check the balls? You could just, it's right there, isn't it? I just think it would make my life be so good. So, yeah, a boy can dream, can't they? But, again.
Fantastic. How many ball costumes have you owned over the years? I'm curious.
Just the one. It's
just the one. Okay.
It gets reskinned. I keep saying it's probably not the right terminology.
Of course it does.
Yeah, I added pockets and pubes this year, more pubes, because people thought I was a hairy heart. I kept getting hairy heart from the little kids, and I was like, I need to make this more pube-like. So it's got little pubes that bounce. They're free floating, and I mean, the thing with the running is, like, especially like London Marathon, you get 1 million people on the day.
Yep.
Like, it goes viral on TikTok. I get sent TikToks from friends and trustees and supporters like, have you seen this? It's got like 200,000 views. I'm not even on TikTok, but yeah, that's lovely. People post reels about it, and the media have been absolutely fantastic. We've had some incredible coverage, like in the millions, been in loads of newspapers and stuff. It's the extreme end of like, who would want to run as a giant pair of testicles through the streets of London? I'm like, absolutely game on. And I take that as part of my job, is the ambassadorial role of, I have to do the things other people won't. And I actually had this year, I had a testicular cancer survivor running it for the first time. We own a half marathon as a charity, and I had a chest infection. So he took on the mantle of the balls, and he was like, it was the best experience. It was incredible. And I was just really privileged that someone that had been through it, through their own journey, then got to experience a day in the balls. And it was just it's amazing. It's one of these ones that I can't believe how much people respond to it. I think people love silly, don't they? And they love seeing people do silly. And if that silly has a really serious message behind it and a really, authentic and earnest message behind it. It's not just I'm doing this because I want views. It's not a clickbaity YouTube video. It is.
Yep.
I'm a guy that's, as you said, I have dedicated 14 years of my life, best part of my adult life to this cause. I know this inside out, and I know the story, and I know the why, and I want to prevent other people going through what my family did. So again, you take the silliest highs with the serious lows of the message, and sweet spot right in between.
My man, Toby, and I want to. What your statement there just was, I want to prevent other families from going through what my family went through. Here's the thing: you have, and I'm curious if you and your family, if the gravity of that, the idea that you and your efforts and your antics have literally saved lives. Do you give yourself permission to, to even take a breath on that? And I mean, if not yourself, the idea that Rob has saved lives, and it's a beautiful notion. And with the humility that you have come to this discussion with today, I'm curious if ever you're able to give yourself permission to kind of tip a cap to what it is that you've all done and how you have saved lives. And when you hear people tell you that, how does that make you feel?
Very emotional, I have to admit. I remember the first time someone said it, and I just I sat down, I was on a phone call, and I sat down and I was sort of just a bit teary-eyed. And I remember telling my wife now, I was just like, someone's just told me this story. That was the first time it had ever happened. So yeah, I tried to take it in. I'm a bit better at it now. I do remember, a reasonably pragmatic father, again, in the best of ways. I love my dad. I remember telling him once, and he was like, that's amazing, on to the next one. And that's sort of been the philosophy, has been, yes, that's amazing, on to the next one. Unfortunately, the job's not done. It's not been a case of not taking it in, appreciating it. I'm better now that I've got a team, because I want them to take in the moments more than I am about myself. I'm not very good at taking in the moments. I can literally pinpoint 3 times in the charities where someone stopped me to take in the moment and been like, no, you have to appreciate where we're at this point. I was like, that's quite nice. But I've got a very forward thinking brain. It's always just what's the next, how many more. I think I'm just wired that way, and that's a driver. I do like that. But yeah, I'm getting better because my team do so much now. It's not just me. They do amazing work. I love being able to just stop and think, wow, how can we celebrate that as a team? How can we, take this moment in? I think sometimes, as you've said multiple times now, it's easier to do it for other people than yourself. Yeah. But that realization, I was just saying that realization of someone said it to me quite recently on a podcast that, your brother's death has saved lives. And I just thought that it's just a very amazing full circle way of saying it. And that hit me quite hard. I was like, yeah, that is, you couldn't ask for more. He didn't die in sacrifice. He didn't want to die by any means, but saving a life because of your death is, what a poignant thing to do. If you leave this earth too early.
Well, and with the dark humor that you were talking about, I'm certain that he would have a wisecrack if that was brought to him. Your death is going to save lives. I'm certain there'd be some sort of joke there, but I'm also certain there'd be an amazing piece of humility and love and gratitude towards that as well. And gratitude. I mean, you referred to it earlier. How important gratitude is. If people want to look into more the Robin Cancer Trust, what's the best way to do it?
Website, therobincancertrust.org, or we're on all socials at RCT Charity. And you can
RCT
search,
Charity, yeah.
RCT, okay. You can search Talking Bollocks or Not Overreacting, which are our 2 campaigns, and I'm sure you'll find us.
Is there footage of you running around as a pair of balls?
There's probably too much footage of me, right? Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Toby Talks Balls, and it's just a whole page dedicated to me as a giant testicle at this point. So, yeah, I mean, the Thrive Against Cancer podcast as well is an amazing resource, and I would say it's an amazing resource for people going through cancer, but actually the people that have listened to it, who it's been amazingly eye-opening, is people who've never been affected by cancer. People going, oh my God, that's how I now support someone, knowing that skill of how to show up, how to be there for someone if you're ever affected by cancer. And it's 1 in 2, so it's probably a skill we should all learn. So I think that the podcast is an amazing resource for anyone, not just the cancer community.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate what it is that you do for the world and this conversation today. I thank you so much for sharing your vulnerability. My love to your family, to your mom. Please know that like we're setting up amazing energy for all of you, in not just what you do, but what you're also going through right now as well. This is why we do the show. We literally love sharing perspectives and going through this and hearing these different stories. Iron sharpening iron, and we hope to be a piece of iron for anybody who hears as an earshot or watching this show. This has been another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.